The Jacksonville Jaguars fired head coach Doug Pederson, but didn't take out the rest of the garbage, and it was a massive, massive mistake. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every single Tuesday, by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, it's time to talk about all of the Black Monday news. We got new first-year head coaches that could be fired next. The Colts and Giants are bringing the band back, and the Jacksonville Jaguars made a move but didn't do enough. Before we get into all of it, do want to thank you for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first to listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lauren, the Jacksonville Jaguars fired Doug Pederson, a move that we have all been anticipating for, honestly, 2 months now, but they did not finish the deal.
Yeah, I really feel for Jacksonville Jaguars fans, where you're looking for hope and optimism right now from a change in leadership, but not the change they were looking for.
Not quite. And I mean, not enough of the change they were looking for is probably the best way to put that. So Doug Pederson is fired, but Trent Baalke, the much maligned general manager, was not. And my guy Tony Wiggins, the afternoon host of Locked On NFL, talked about his team, the Jaguars, making a big mistake.
Now, here's the thing. Why are there so many things that as a GM you don't want your coach to do, the one that you picked? Why are you guys not in lockstep the way Detroit is? I done seen Dan Campbell giving game balls to the GM before. Why are y'all not in lockstep? What's wrong? You're not in lockstep because you're a bad leader. It's bad leadership. Whether that leadership is in the form of being a hard leader or whether that leadership is in the form of sort of blending in and understanding and removing yourself from the situation and ingratiating yourself in the situation and putting a little bit more of what you think should be happening on the DNA of this team and Doug Pederson moving forward. Leadership isn't just about directing people. Leadership is about impacting people and inspiring people, not necessarily pandering or not necessarily pacifying, but there's a way that you can get things done.
I mean, I understand Tony's anger there with not getting rid of Trent Baalke as the general manager, a guy who will be hiring his third head coach now in his 5 years as the general manager for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think the biggest point of frustration for Jags fans is not just that Trent Baalke is going to be staying with the organization, but what it means for their ability to hire a coach. I do want to go to a quote that was pulled from an article by John Shipley, who covers the Jacksonville Jaguars for Sports Illustrated, and he got an inside source with a prominent head coaching candidate. And I'll tell you this, folks, most people believe that this prominent head coaching candidate is Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions. And the quote from the coach, now I can't confirm that, but the word on the street, or the prevailing thought, is that this quote right here comes from Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions. We can't know for certain. I want to make sure that I put that caveat in there but that is what people are assuming right now. Either way, whether it came from Ben Johnson or some other prominent head coaching candidate, this is damning stuff. Quote, for the Jaguars to change direction, you have to actually change direction. Retaining Trent Baalke greatly diminishes my interest in that job. Lots of promise, but same roadblocks. That coming directly from a prominent head coaching candidate this hiring cycle, that is damning right there for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, it's worth noting, like, at least as the time we're recording this, Ben Johnson is not agreed to an interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars yet. We don't know
Exactly.
whether that'll happen, but all the reporting has been, Ben Johnson's going to be very careful about what interviews he takes and only take interviews with teams he's serious about. And the Jacksonville Jaguars aren't one of them. And it feels like in this process, yes, the Jaguars just fired Doug Pederson, but they've been a little slow on getting on the horse here and getting interview requests out and getting names out there. Like, you'd think they would have had some of this working in the background, and yet maybe that's where some of the dysfunction starts there.
Yeah, you're 100% right. You would think that they would have kind of greased the skids a little bit more, but when they didn't fire Doug Pederson 2 months ago, when we basically were getting reports that he was fired, you're right. That probably gives us a window into how messed up things are. And the thing is, for Jaguars fans, I feel for them, because you have to be so frustrated, because this is a good opening. Trevor Lawrence is a solid young quarterback, maybe a little overpaid, but who isn't at the quarterback position nowadays if you don't have a guy on a rookie contract? They have Travon Walker, Josh Hines Allen, some good stuff on the offensive line, and Walker Little, who's a okay offensive tackle, but Anton Harrison at right tackle has been pretty solid. They have Brian Thomas Jr., who might be an all-pro wide receiver in his rookie season, at least in consideration for that. They have weapons at every position. They have good stuff on defense. Like, this should be maybe the top head coach opening of the entire offseason, but because of Jacksonville's organization and keeping Trent Baalke around, it is going to prevent Jacksonville from getting the top candidates in this hiring cycle. And again, I just feel bad for Jacksonville's fans.
Well, isn't everything you just said there a reason to keep Trent Baalke? I mean, the things they've done on the roster there's two sides of it, right? There's do you trust him to pick your next head coach? But then also, how well do you trust him to build up your roster? And yeah, you can look around the Jacksonville roster and find a lot to like. I think you can look around and maybe find a lot to not like. And it's sort of this chicken and the egg question where it's like, okay, is the talent good and the coaching bad? Or was the talent making the coaching look worse, or was the coaching making the talent look worse? And how much blame you put on Baalke for either the coaching or the talent causing the problem?
And I think, to go back to Tony's clip, it's not just about doing your job well when you're in that sort of position, when you're the general manager of an NFL team. You have to inspire people to do better. And I think a lot of people look at just the draft picks and the roster, but behind the scenes, how do they interact with the head coach? The decisions they make in terms of hiring those people who we never even see in the organization who are hired by the general manager. Like, what's going on with all of those moves behind the scenes? Trent Baalke is historically very, very difficult to deal with behind the scenes. So I think you're right. And I think that's how Trent Baalke saved his own job here with Shaq Khan. I think that he looked at him and he said, look at the roster. And we've heard Khan multiple times say this is the most talented roster Jacksonville's ever had. Him saying that tells you exactly what he thinks about this power dynamic. But I have a feeling that, like with Trent Baalke's other stops, behind the scenes, there's a little bit more to it than you would think. Do want to at least mention some other firings that happen here. They're not quite on a massive scale of GM or head coach, but the Cincinnati Bengals did fire defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, and then the Seattle Seahawks fired offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. For me personally, Lauren, I don't have a problem with moving on from Ryan Grubb. He just wanted to throw the ball a ton, and I think Seattle wanted to run the ball more than they did. I think there's a difference in philosophy there between the head coach and the offensive coordinator. But in Cincinnati, I just think they made a massive mistake. They had no talent on the defensive side of the ball, and Lou Anarumo is going to get a job right away. He may not be, Vic Fangio, but I think Lou Anarumo is a very good defensive coach, and he went from having head coaching opportunities to now being fired as a DC in Cincinnati. I think that might have been a sacrificial lamb situation for the season they had.
Yeah, I'm with you there on both of those fronts. I find myself concerned if I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan that, you can get stuck in this whole cycle of, okay, you hired the good defensive coordinator, head coach, but 1 year in the offensive coordinator already there's a philosophical difference. Like, he didn't have a better grasp of that coming into the position. Like that, that's the start of that. That can be the start of a very dangerous cycle that is not fun for any team to have to deal with.
Well, Lauren, as someone, and you as someone who's seen a defensive head coach get himself fired because he can't figure out the offensive side of the ball, me with Mike Vrabel, you with Matt Eberflus, we know this story all too well. Mike McDonald can be the best coach in the NFL on defense. If he can't figure out how to hire on offense, he is going to fail, and that's why it's dangerous to hire a defensive first head coach. But with that being said, we got to look at some teams who didn't fire their staff. Do want to let you guys know, though, that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving Prize Picks. I've been playing for a while now. I'm having a blast this week. Might look at, Josh Allen over 230 passing yards, maybe Saquon Barkley for more than one touchdown. It's so easy to use. I love how fast the payouts are. I've gotten paid in as little as 15 minutes when my picks hit, plus the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday add even more value to my lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, it's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, looking at all of the Black Monday news that we got. Jacksonville makes a move, but it's not quite enough. We've seen some coordinators get fired, but I want to look at two situations where teams decided not to make any moves, and they brought back their current group, and we'll start with the New York Football Giants, who brought back their coach and their GM, and my girl Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants talked about that decision.
The New York Giants announced that they are retaining head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen, despite the team having finished with its worst one-loss record in its 100-year history. The announcement, made via a team-issued statement by team co-owner John Mara, reaffirmed belief in the two men's ability to fix what ails the franchise. Now, this appeared to be the direction that the decision was going in now for at least a couple of weeks, as it's long been believed that at the core of the team's problems was the quarterback position. Remember, the Giants in the offseason seriously sought to trade up in the draft for a franchise quarterback, only to not be able to find a willing trade partner. So they pivoted. They took receiver Malik Nabers in the first round of the 2024 draft, a decision that pretty much worked out for them. But without a solid quarterback play, which again, they were looking to upgrade back in the offseason last year, the team had its doubts. There was some hope.
So looking at that quarterback position, and I think that that's really what this whole entire decision hinges on. You bring back Brian Daboll, you bring back Joe Schoen, and you say, look, go get a quarterback. And that quarterback better succeed. I'm looking at the Giants, and if they get a rookie quarterback and they don't play pretty well within the first few months of the season, both those guys are probably fired mid-season 2025.
Which is like the opposite of what you want to do for a rookie quarterback.
Exactly.
Right? Have organizational stability and structure to say, you're locked in with this head coach and this GM, and we're going to grow and build this thing together. And I just can't help but look at the Giants and be like, this is the same front office that both doubled down on Daniel Jones there, but then also, like Pat talked about, they tried to trade up for a quarterback, but even if they had stayed at 5 or at 6 where they drafted, like Michael Penix came after that, JJ McCarthy came after that,
Bo Nix
after that, like none that those are all going to be Hall of Fame franchise quarterbacks, but it wasn't like there was nothing they could do. So ho-hum, we'll just run it. Like there's just multiple quarterback mistakes along the way. That's like, these are the guys you're going to let pick the next one.
Yeah, that makes sense to have that skepticism. You're right. They could have paid more to trade up and get the guy that they wanted. If they knew that their job was going to be on the line, why not do that and let someone else worry about the future picks that you're not going to be able to use because you got fired? They could have drafted one of the quarterbacks. And if they couldn't properly identify that Bo Nix or Michael Penix were better players than Daniel Jones, and they also weren't able to execute a trade up the board to get who they really did like. If they failed on both of the evaluation of the third or the second set of quarterbacks and then a failure to trade up, why would you trust these people to make another trade? They're probably going to have to trade up again here. There are 2 quarterbacks that most people consider first-round talents here, and maybe you drop back into the second round and you look at like a Jackson Dart or a Jalen Milroe or, Carson Beck, something like that. That's what you're looking at. But is that really what you're going to stake your job security on? They can't do that. So now the Giants are in a position where they have to act out of desperation and out of self-preservation rather than what's truly best for the franchise going forward. And I don't understand from the ownership perspective, if you have that short of a leash on these guys and that thin of a window for them to actually thread the needle to succeed and keep their jobs going forward, why not just make the move and clean house?
This is like trying to have a baby to save the relationship, right? It's like,
yes,
you really want the baby or whatever, and it's a good thing to go after a baby. You should want to have a baby or whatever, but like, it's not going to fix the relationship here. It's just creating even more of a problem, and it's not going to work out well here for anybody, especially the baby.
Yeah. Especially the baby. Yeah, I feel terrible for whatever first-year quarterback ends up in New York, knowing that, if he doesn't perform right out of the gate, his coach is getting fired, the GM's getting fired, and then what's the case going to be? With that being said, Giants trade up with the Titans, first overall pick. Come on, let's make that move. Let's take advantage of that desperation. But looking at another team that kept the band together, and it's the Indianapolis Colts. They keep head coach Shane Steichen. They keep, even more controversial, Chris Ballard, the general manager. Let me say this, Lauren. Before I took over as the lead host on Locked On NFL, I had my 1 day a week. And on that 1 day a week, I routinely, at every turn, said that Chris Ballard is the most overrated general manager in the NFL. He does nothing of substance. He uses the excuse of Andrew Luck's early retirement to forward his career to infinity. And I thought this year would probably be the year where the Colts make a change, but they bring back both. I don't really have a problem with Shane Steichen. I think Steichen's actually done a pretty good job winning as many games as he has with Garner Minshew last year and whatever this version of Anthony Richardson was. Now, you could say that he was intimately involved in picking Anthony Richardson, and his failure to develop over the last 2 years is on Shane Steichen. But I just feel like the Colts have won as many games as they possibly could win, both the last 2 seasons. And to me, that means that Shane Steichen may not be the quarterback guru that everybody hoped he would be, but he's still a good football coach.
Yeah, but okay, if you fire the general manager and leave Steichen in place, is the new GM going to want to come in and inherit Shane Steichen, or do you have to clear them both out at that point? I mean, I think ideally maybe you just let the new GM pick a new head coach and say, sorry, like Shane Steichen's good, but not so good that you got to keep Chris Ballard to keep him around. But right. I don't know. I find myself looking at the Colts feeling like it can get worse. So like, I know you want to get better, but like you could fire these guys, get an even worse GM and worse coach in there and go backwards. I can understand saying, hey, we've been overachieving a little bit here and holding things together. Let's just see where this Anthony Richardson thing keeps playing out a little bit longer. And if they get more of a definitive answer of like, no, this guy isn't the guy, then that'll be a more natural time to kind of restart everything from GM, head coach, and maybe at that point, quarterback. Yeah,
I think there is, because of when Richardson returned to the lineup, there were some good moments in there. Still the same, problems with inaccuracy and everything like that. But you saw a little bit better play than we got from him early in the year. So I understand that what you mean. Give him that final year, all 3 of them together. And if it doesn't work, and I'll tell you what, Lauren, if the Indianapolis Colts bottom out next year and draft Arch Manning, I am going to be on the show crying. No doubt about it. I cannot take another Manning in Indianapolis, but boy, I could see the vision and how that would work out. But I understand what you mean, keeping all those guys together for one more season. But I just had to take my opportunity to take a pot shot at Chris Ballard any chance that I can.
Well, I just think I'm interested to see like what team tries the future Anthony Richardson reclamation project, right? Brings him.
It'll be Minnesota.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
It's right? A halfway house for NFL quarterbacks that fail.
I think it'd be a fun fit. Or like maybe
I would love to see KOC with Anthony Richardson. That would be hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If he can make Sam Darnold look like an all-pro, I think he can make Anthony Richardson look like a good starting quarterback. So
maybe future Pittsburgh Steeler there. Like,
ooh, Ooh, okay. Yeah, I could see that. I could see the fit with Mike Tomlin, a better version of Justin Fields.
I like how we're already writing Anthony Richardson's career obituary before we even give him a chance to fully fail
Right,
here.
right. Knowing my luck, Lauren, that'll mean he'll be an all-pro next year. But with that being said, we got to look at some other moves that could potentially happen. We looked at moves that did happen, moves that did not happen, and now let's look at some moves that could potentially happen with some head coaches who could be next to be fired. First, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was a concert that I attended last year. The energy, the excitement, it was unforgettable. I got those tickets on Game Time. And now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming event, using the Game Time app, of course. And with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even get a view from my seat before buying my tickets. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the firings that have happened, the firings that aren't going to happen, but what firings could come next. Before we dive into it, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins. There's new news. I love saying that. There's new news happening all the time during this time of year in the NFL. So you get your morning edition of Locked On NFL, get your afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. Get subscribed. Stay subscribed. But there are some potential moves that could happen. Looking at maybe Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas, although it looked like he might be good to go after his press conference on Monday. You look at Brian Callahan with the Tennessee Titans, both first-year head coaches who did not have good seasons. Callahan also had a press conference on Monday, made it seem like he might be back. Lauren, there's those two guys, and are there any other, people who you think might get fired before the end of the week?
I mean, the only lingering one that there's always the wild card of the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like,
yes.
I know the Mike McCarthy thing is always a little bit of this. Jerry Jones seems like depending on how he wakes up in the morning might depend on how the Dallas Cowboys move forward with their franchise. But that's kind of the main ones. Like I was thinking about like all the teams at the top of the NFL draft, right? It's like Tennessee is the question mark here. Cleveland's probably not going to fire Stefanski. Not really his fault.
They shouldn't.
Giants, no, I don't think so either. Giants are stick with their guys. Patriots fired their guys. Jaguars fired their guys. Raiders are on the fence there. Jets fired their guys. Panthers are still new in their regime. Saints already fired their guys. Bears already fired their guys. And then you get to San Francisco and Dallas. Like, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're a good number here.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're probably looking at any kind of general managers. Like the Titans could fire their general manager, Rand Carthon. That's definitely a possibility. We could see little changes like that. Well, those aren't little changes, but, changes people aren't expecting. I'll be honest with you. I hope that they don't fire Antonio Pierce. While I don't think that Antonio Pierce is one of the best head coaches in the NFL or anything like that, or he's unfireable in any way, they gave him Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew at quarterback. I mean, what could you possibly expect the win total to be with those two guys at quarterback? I'm sorry, but I just don't think that that's fair. And now maybe behind the scenes, he signed off on that. Maybe they could have went out and done more at the quarterback position. Antonio Pierce projected confidence and said, no, I'll find a way to win with those guys. And if that's the case, well, then he gets what he deserves. No doubt about it. But I just have a level of empathy with Antonio Pierce because he was truly given garbage at quarterback. I mean, Gardner Minshew is a pure backup. Aiden O'Connell is a pure backup. I'm sorry, I'm not buying the Aiden O'Connell could potentially be a starter one. No, that's nonsense. No. I refuse to buy that. So I guess maybe if we knew more behind the scenes, I would feel differently. But I have some empathy for for Antonio Pierce because of the quarterback situation he was given. And maybe I'm too in the trenches with the Titans, and you could say the same about Will Levis and Mason Rudolph.
I think there's something to be said there. I mean, I don't know, Antonio Pierce, it wouldn't be fair to him, no, but it always kind of felt like the 1 year of Lovie Smith with the Houston Texans, where it was like, okay, maybe they didn't have their options last year. Maybe they kind of got pressured into it by the players last year. And then, Tom Telesco comes in as GM, and it feels a little bit like Antonio Pierce was hoisted on him a little bit there. Like, maybe he could have put his foot down, but you're trying to balance a locker room and an existing organization, and you say, okay, we gave you this year, and the Devontae Adams pressure is gone, and there's a lot of guys have kind of flamed out there. Like, I thought the whole point of Antonio Pierce was like, hold the locker room together and keep a nice.
Yeah, he got along with the vets.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem to be the case now. So it's like in the movie Office Space. Like, so what is it you say that you do here exactly? If he's not a scheme guy and he's not the locker room guy. I mean, we were talking about this with Matt Eberf, who's in Chicago for a while. It's like once the defense started dropping off a little bit this year, it's like, okay, if you're not giving us good defense and you're not the culture CEO guy, then what is it exactly you would say that you do here? And it's not fair to Antonio Pierce because of the situation. But if I'm GM Tom Telesco, I'm looking around saying, Vrabel's out there, all these different coaches are out there that I might see as an upgrade there that I could more handpick and tie my job security to, as opposed to the guy I sort of inherited. It's not super clear.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw a move there. I just think, it may be the right move, but at the end of the day, it's a raw deal for Antonio Pierce. You know what I mean? But with that being said, again, news comes fast and furious this time of year. I'll be honest, you record a podcast, no matter who you are, you record a podcast this time of year, there's a very high chance that by the time that podcast goes out, things are already out of date. So have to keep that in mind. But that's why we have 2 editions of Locked On NFL here, because Tony Wiggins have got you on the afternoon edition of today's show. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today. Your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, my co-host, Lauren Cox. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed, and as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.